Good morning. Good morning, honored speakers, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen. On behalf of the Phone Global Institute, a very warm welcome to Day 2 of Asia Global Dialogue 2013. My name is Colleen Yu, and I'm delighted to be the MC for today. Yesterday, we successfully launched into our theme, Towards a New Global Economy, What Next for Jobs, Opportunity, and Growth. It prompted thought-provoking presentations by our keynote and plenary speakers. Many thoughts and perspectives were also shared on the Institute's 4 key research themes, and we should continue to hear further insights from the constructive debates and discussions during our plenary and parallel sessions today. Without further ado, let's proceed to the first plenary session. Thank you.
What are Asia's strengths in innovation? Is Asia ready to lead? What innovations can Asia offer the future? Introducing Dean Soumitra Dutta from Samuel Curtis Johnson Graduate School of Management at Cornell University.
Good morning, everyone. Good morning.
Good morning.
Did you have a good day yesterday? Victor, thank you so much for helping organize this. I think it's a great event. We're having a great time, and we'll have a great discussion today on innovation. But before I begin, I think it would be remiss if I did not acknowledge the passing of a great leader last evening. I think we are all very sad to hear about the Nelson Mandela's death. He was not only a great leader who transformed his own nation and the destiny of a continent, but also was a great human being who taught us many valuable things about human values and importance of community. Can I invite you to join in a moment of silence in his memory? Thank you. So now we begin with the session for today. And this session is really focused on innovation and business opportunity. Most of the sessions have a question associated with it, and the question that we have in front of us is, can Asia lead? Now, the theme of innovation is something which has come up yesterday already. Sam Palmisano, Marcus Wallenberg, Victor Fung, and others refer to the importance of innovation for the future of Asia's development, Asia's sustainability, and a number of important factors are dependent on Asia's success in innovation. I'm reminded myself of a small interaction I had with a Japanese CEO, and we are very lucky to have 2 very eminent Japanese CEOs here with us today on the panel. But this gentleman told me of a small experience for him back in the 70s. So as a young child, he went to visit upstate New York, and like many tourists to upstate New York, his parents took him to see the Niagara Falls. And as a child, his parents bought him some small gifts from the shops selling gifts and other trinkets in Niagara Falls. And what he remembered was the gifts that his parents bought him in Niagara Falls had the label made in Japan. And he was referring to the fact that, of course, today if you went and bought similar gifts or trinkets in Niagara Falls, any other tourist destination, the label would most likely not be made in Japan. And Japan has made this successful transition from being seen as a manufacturer of relatively low-cost, cheap products, today to being seen as a leader in innovation in many aspects globally. Japan is not the only country that has made the transition. Korea has made the transition in many sectors. China is in the process of making the same transition. Israel has made the same transition. And many of the nations are competing to try to make the same transition. And the reasons for this really are that innovation is critical for future sustainable job creation and other kinds of economic development in the nations. Now, we have 4 distinguished panel members, and they don't really need an introduction. We have Hidei-san he's the founder and chief executive officer of Quantum Leaps Corporation, and of course, the ex-CEO and chairman of Sony. We have Takeshi Ninami-san, who is the chief executive officer of Lawson Incorporation, and John Dries, the vice chairman of GE Company, and John Pascal Tricoire, who is the chairman and chief executive officer of Schneider Electric. So I think we have a good combination of Asian, European, and American perspectives, though I fully understand the companies they represent are really global in nature, so they really cover the world. So let's begin with Hidei-san, and maybe you can begin with your perspective on how you see this question of innovation and can Asia lead.
Thank you. Thank you, Victor and Andrew, for inviting me to this panel. When I talk about innovation, most people think about technology innovation. But I think most innovative industry today is a financial industry. So as a result of too much innovative, the Asian crash, 1997, and the Lehman shock is another example of that, how, financial industry are innovative. Well, this is a kind of negative innovation. Sorry about financial people, but still, we are living in fear that, financial industry is really bigger than financial debt created by innovation of the financial industry is bigger than GDP of the world. So this is, please take it as a kind of a joke. Please be innovative. And probably second most innovative person today, our Prime Minister Abe changed mindset. Of course, Mr. Ninami-san contributed a lot, but he's a kind of a magician to change the mindset of Japan to more positive one. So he's a kind of innovative leader. So talking about innovation from Asia, I think innovation is a kind of the thing which happened by based on social needs of Asia and combined by technology seeds. So if you look at what is a social need in Asia, I think almost all Asian countries, especially China, for example, is a kind of urbanization, is a social needs. And talking about Japan, probably how we can cope with aging society is another social needs. So such kind of social needs is a kind of, I think, platform for the innovation. So I think most of the country in Asia is really facing this urbanization needs. But if you see the city of today, like Shanghai, Tokyo, Los Angeles, New York, Abu Dhabi, or Dubai, so this is a kind of a city of the 20th century. So when we create kind of society for that, innovative society for that tomorrow, maybe Asia can make kind of innovation, original, from Asia. So I just want to give you a kind of a concept of the innovation from Asia. So the theme of this innovation, panel is can Asia lead innovation? I think answer is yes, if they take advantage of this urbanization needs. I think in your computer and your smartphone, there's an operating system called, whatever called iPhone, and Android for the Google, and then Microsoft, operating system in computer. And then on the top of the operating system, there are many applications. So the combination of the platform as a kind of operating system and application make people everyday's life exciting. So if it's like a metaphor of the operating system to the city, maybe you can urbanization. Maybe we can design the operating system for urban operating system or city operating system, which is a platform for the smart city or platform for the future town. This operating system probably consists of several layers, maybe energy or communication, or maybe even the school or hospital or anything. So I think this concept of urbanization and the operating system is really very close. So if we design something, common to Asia, of course, climate different and the country different, or size different. Maybe we can make a kind of by collaboration of Japan and Taiwan and Hong Kong and China mainland or many countries. Maybe we can make some kind of, of a concept of OS for the Asian city. So then probably we can settle some kind of conflict of the politician talking about, of these days. But I think that's kind of collaboration. Urban OS for Asia is a kind of my idea, for the kind of platform for the innovation for the future of the Asia. So I thank you.
Thank you so much, Ide-san. I think your concept of an urban operating system from Asia is a very interesting and very innovative idea. But let me just probe a little further on a comment you made earlier, half sort of joking about too much innovation, negative innovation. But I want to just check with you, with the audience. Do you really believe that we can have too much innovation in society? Is innovation always good? Or do we have to put some constraints and bounds on innovation, be it technology innovation, be it biological, biotechnology innovation, be it other kinds of innovation? Let's have a quick sense of show of hands, and I'm going to come to you, Ide-san, just for a quick response on this. How many of you feel that innovation needs to have some bounds, needs to have some constraints? Can we have a quick show of hands? Thank you. Ide-san, do you want to respond to that? What's your view on that?
No, innovation, for example, during World War I or World War II, there are a lot of innovation, created. So like we use internet. So internet, basically, it's a coming technology for the military in America. We use GPS. The GPS technology is born from the war. So I think it's very difficult to define, kind of. Your question is, of course, yes and no, but
Okay, we'll come back and explore that, because I think the issue in terms of governance, at a very high level, in terms of how we decide what is right, what is wrong, both for the organization and society as a whole, raises an important issue also in the context of this notion of smart cities, because inside cities, of course, you have a whole range of factors being under consideration. So let me just park that issue aside for a moment, and let's come back to, let's move to another speaker. So Nanami-san, maybe I'd like to request to express your own views in terms of what you think about the topic of the panel.
Thank you very much, Professor Duda. Maybe I'd like to introduce Lawson a little bit. Japan has been going through the convenience to change the lifestyle And I think Japanese convenience store format has contributed a lot for that. And the Japanese convenience store is quite different than that of the United States. And this retail sector has been successful for more than 40 years because we always stay with the foreseeable changes of the society. For example, at the time of the rapid growth of economy, we provided fast food with the 3 truck delivery per day to give the freshness to the very busy man. Now, we have to touch upon the social issues, which is, as Ide-san mentioned, the aging of society. So we are always in vicinity of the people, and we provide innovation to seek convenience. But sometimes too much is not maybe innovation. But I think, I believe innovation is derived from a strong effort to always meet the changing demands of people and to solve social issues. Innovation eventually leads to change lifestyle of people and society for the better. Let me touch upon a little bit about Japan. I think as a reflection, negative tone, but it should be changing now because of Mr. Abe. We want competition based on the number of new technology, but lost competition of business. I think in the recent 20 years, I would say, because the technology wasn't applied to business well. Japan is not good at monetizing the technology. Why did it happen? Number of patents is important, but however, we need very capable general managers in business to implement the change or changes to society for the better. Innovation is not technology-oriented, but business-oriented to meet social demands which are visible, sometimes invisible. So I agree with the Ide-san about the innovation is always to stay with the changes, social issues. That's the solid base for innovation. And take a look at Asia. Going back to the question, Asia can lead? Yes, I think so. But I have some key points to raise. One, fair competition. Deregulation should be the important factor to uplift the innovation level. So Asian countries have to do more work toward the deregulation so that fair competition happens. 2, education. I think in this, element, I think Asian countries are so keen about education to develop good human resources. That's a plus. Freedom of speech, because we have to argue, among the people. I think some countries have to do more toward their freedom of speech, which is very important. And attractive environment for talented people to come from the rest of the world. Definitely need diversity. We need talented people to get together. So that environment is a prerequisite for the innovative environment. And maybe differentiation oriented. Well, this is related to competition, heavy competition. To win the competition, definitely differentiation is a source for the innovation. 7, financial resources. I think this part, Asia can secure finance, but too much is sometimes a problem, just like it is mentioned. I think finally, we have to be prepared for the middle income trap. That will happen anyway. I think that is happening in China. And Japan went through successfully because we brought lots of licenses from the United States at the time of Cold War time. IP is very important to create preparation at the time of the middle income trap. how to avoid or how to go through middle income trap, definitely innovation is very important. But how to create innovative environment, definitely IP rights should be invited to Asian countries. But how to protect is from the country to export IPs. I recommend later on I'll be discussing with Victor. Asian countries should join the TPP, maybe, RCEP, so that IP rights are secure, and then bring in the IP and create more, environment toward innovation, because that created a lot of engineers, a lot of scientists in Japan eventually. And because of that transactions, Japan created IPs more, after all. So protecting IP is important for both of countries, exporting, importing licenses, patents. And human resources is the most important thing to create innovative, environment. People. So I think, lastly, how to avoid the middle income trap. And then that leads to the innovative environment. Thank you very much.
Okay. Thank you so much. And I think you outlined a number of, in fact, elements that Asian countries have to work on to become innovative. Let me pick up on one of them because very close to my heart, also education. And you hear a number of calls for reform in education. At the same time, if you look at the recently released results from the OECD has a PISA studies. And the top 5 nations are all East Asian nations. Chinese students rank number 1 on that list. And the gap is so big that, in fact, the lead of the Chinese students from Shanghai area almost amounts to 3 extra years of schooling compared to others in other countries. America, I think, slipped from 26th to 32nd in the 30s somewhere. So what kind of reform are you looking for?
I think education always needs, finance, and as well as the government effort. And I'm sorry to say that Japan has been losing the ground against maybe the Chinese students. But the key thing is how to create the environment for them to enjoy the, innovative culture. And some of them go to Silicon Valley, after all, to find the final destination, to find the environmental, innovative environment. I think education is important, but how to educate people is important. To touch upon the Japanese educational system, which is sucking, as a matter of fact. Instead of learning by heart, definitely push students to think on their own. That education is very important toward innovation. Well, more or less, we just created standardized human resources, not to think on their own. Instead, they just follow 1 + 1, is 2. Instead, we have to create 1 + 1 is 4 or 5. That kind of education is needed for innovative environment. I think, I don't know exactly what's happening in Shanghai, but I think the education is toward that direction. And Japan has to change toward the thought process-oriented education. That's very important.
I was in Silicon Valley last month for some Cornell alumni meetings, and I met with some colleagues in Stanford University. And they were telling me that now when young undergraduates join Stanford University, they get letters from the local industry in Silicon Valley saying that, please leave your program in Stanford and come and join us. We'll pay you the same amount of money as you'll get when you graduate. So why study? And I say this half facetiously because, of course, there's an issue in terms of risk-taking, and I was discussing in India earlier about the same story. And if an Indian student went and told his parent, that he or she is leaving Harvard or MIT or Stanford or IIT and going and starting a company, the parent would be horrified. And I mean, this is like the worst mistake that the child can make. So it's an interesting question in terms of how mindsets perhaps can also influence. And I think your point about environment is very critical. We'll focus on more the environmental aspects going forward. Let me move to John. You represent GE. GE is a global company. GE also has, I think, got a fair bit of positive repute about all the story on reverse innovation and frugal innovation in India and Asia. And you're innovative in many different respects, in multiple ways, both in the West and the East. What's your perspective on Asian innovation?
Well, I'd start with how we define innovation, because it means a lot of things to a lot of different people. And it's either filled with promise or threat, depending on what your perspective is. And sometimes I think we overcomplicate it, and we could define it simply as doing more with less and getting a better outcome, right? Because I think that's really the goal. And what Ide-san said is if you're doing that and you're not providing for the people at the bottom of the socioeconomic scale, increasingly we live in a world where innovation has to solve some of those problems. And if it doesn't, it's not going to be valued. And the point about Asian innovation is I think we live in a world where globalization transcends borders. There is not one product that we've introduced in our company in the last 10 years that has been based on the work that's done in just one country. So it's not about China innovation or Asian innovation. It's about how people in these countries and regions are connected with the rest of the world. So we spend a lot of time thinking about collaboration. How do we get 60,000 engineers around the world working together so that we can get 1 + 1 = 4? And we started with one of the world's first industrial corporate research labs in 1900. Today we have 5 of those around the world with dozens more smaller spokes, so that we're soaking up the best ideas internally and externally and feeding all of that into an innovation process. And I think this is a journey. I don't think certainly we can't declare victory, or, we don't even know where the destination is, in a way. We're 130 years old, and 110 of those years we were focused on equipment innovation. In the last 20 years or so, we've been focused on services. So we've built service businesses that are half of our $100 billion of industrial revenue. And all of that's been around, so remote monitoring and diagnostics. We went from break-fix to remote monitoring and diagnostics to trying to predict failures. Now we're thinking much more about software, and we've kind of realized all along the way we have 20% of our 60,000 engineers are software engineers. And so now it's about algorithms which allow us to make better, faster decisions. So it's digital innovation. And the fourth area of innovation is process innovation. I don't think we spend enough time. Big companies have to be thinking about innovating the way we run the place, the way decisions are made, where people are located. If you're like Schneider or GE, you operate in well over 100 countries, and figuring that combination out, what do you do where? And how do you make a global matrix work is going to ultimately going to determine our ability to innovate in a cost-effective way. And so these are 4 examples of areas where we have to innovate in order for us to be successful in a world that's demanding that we provide solutions for the people that don't have the kind of stuff that everybody in this room has.
Thank you, John. So one of the themes you've identified as being very important is that innovation is global. So it's very, sometimes perhaps incomplete to talk about Asian innovation, because even the Asian teams are embedded in a larger global context. So can I ask you a question? What do you do, or what lessons are there to help make this collaboration more successful, more effective?
Well, I think it starts with a clear recognition of what you do well in a given location, where you have access to good people, what kind of people are the schools producing that, you know, are there software engineers, are there mechanical engineers, and how do you concentrate on the things that you can do well in a particular country and leverage those capabilities and not try to do everything every place. Because if we try to replicate GE in 160 different countries, we'll fail because we'll have a cost that's too much and it will result in products that are too expensive and people don't want to buy. So we have to be very careful about what we do where, because we want to make 1 + 1 = 4.
So one is the choice in terms of where you choose to do what. Are there elements of the culture in different Asian nations as compared to each other, or even as compared to Western or European nations, that make this collaboration easier, harder?
It's the quality of the people. We look at the kind of people the schools produce. We look at where we're going to get access to external partnerships that will allow us to collaborate. You know, in the 80s and 90s, we probably thought too much that we could solve most of the problems ourselves. Now we realize that if we're not collaborating, partnering with institutions, with other companies, we can't do it. So we have to pick, first, where we find the best people. Second, where we have the partnerships and the external collaborations that will be the most meaningful.
So from your experience, I'm sorry to belabor the point a little bit, but so you don't see any tangible difference or any significant difference between the ability to collaborate between, let's say, a French engineer and an American engineer as compared to an Indian engineer and a Chinese engineer?
Well, I'm not going to slam French engineers with Jean-Pascal here. Not here. No, I do not. I think that the differences actually create value. I mean, there are sometimes different thought processes, the way they're trained is different, but I think it ends up being part of the mix, and we create value with those differences. They don't impede us.
Okay, thank you so much. Jean-Pascal, so you're last, but certainly not the least important, because I think you represent a large global company, and I worked with the company quite a bit also. I think, you know, you bring also strong European roots to the entire discussion. How do you look at Asian innovation from both the global perspective of Schneider Electric, but also from the European roots that perhaps you represent individually?
Yeah, actually, it's going to be difficult to add anything to everything which has been said here. But well, first, our company, like John was describing, on a different scale, is totally global. We do 30% in the Americas of our business, 30% in Europe, on the time zone of Europe, and 30% in Asia. So it's really thinking about the whole dispositive on a global scale. The question that was asked to me is, can Asia lead innovation? Frankly, I've got no doubt. I think one thing that we all share is that probably innovation, when you lead a company, is at the top of our agenda. If there is one thing that keeps me awake at night, it is a question that you asked: too much, too less innovation, and where do we bet our money on innovation? What I see anyway over the past 10 years is a big acceleration of innovation, and if it is a right token of appreciation of innovation, you see the number of patents really increasing very, very fast, actually exponentially, to the point where I think it's going to be an impediment to innovation at one point in time. But the rate of increase has been doubling over the past 5 years, and everybody's throwing away patents on the most absurd things. And at one stage, it might even be an issue. But the clear thing is that innovation is a major stake for regeneration of mature economies, like the internet regenerated North America at one point in time, and the world afterwards, and also for the mid-income trap, which is a well-known issue in emerging countries. Now, can Asia lead innovation? I think the question is behind us. I mean, this country designed a lot of things, from gunpowder and printing and paper and things. But I still remember with a lot of emotion my first Walkman, Ide-san. I think I kind of waited for the first camscope of Sony to get my first kids, actually. Your pace of innovation paced my family rhythm on hybrid vehicles, on those kind of things. So of course, Asia is a big ground of innovation. For Schneider, we have today more than 1/3 of our R&D on application people who are based in Asia, because we believe that Asia is a fantastic bed for innovation. And why is that? And I'm going to probably complement what Tak was saying. I was trying to list why Asia should be a major ground for innovation. I think the first thing is that the mother of innovation is constraint, is challenges. And there is no other part of the world like Asia in terms of huge, airy challenges. We spoke about urbanization. Who else in the world can speak to China or India in terms of urbanization issues? Who can speak to Japan in terms of scarcity of resources, respect to the population? And when you face those challenges, you absolutely have to innovate. So we are engineers, right? We love big, airy, difficult slopes to climb. And when 2 years ago we have pretty big troops in Japan, we realized that nuclear was going down by 25%, still you had to power cities. Then you deploy technology with your partners to find solutions. When you deal with the pollution with Wumai in China and we work with our partners, these are important challenges to take on. Then, of course, these are places of hardworking, highly educated people, and at the same time a tradition of collaboration and competition going together. You are speaking about where do we put our R&D centers. I would exactly answer like John, but there is also the notion of clustering. When your R&D people are in Japan or in Germany, you are pretty good at doing machine manufacturing, because those two countries are leading the world in machine manufacturing. When you do electronics, you are better off in some. When you do internet, Silicon Valley is not a bad option. So there is people and there is also the clustering. I think also Asia is massively competitive, and I believe in that creative destruction or destructive creation. But Asia is a good bed of harshly competing or collaborating for survival on developing, and that creates the right mindset for innovation. And then it's a booming economy in many places, and when you've got the right economy, it's better to invest. I mean, there are countries where you spend your time from restructuring to restructuring. In other places where it's easier because you've got this good economy. I also think government have a role to play. We are deep into smart cities that you were all mentioning. When you are creating the new cities in China, 300 million people to urbanize in 5 years, with people who are natively interested into technology, this is a good test bed to deploy new technologies and use. Now let me be negative this time, or provocative, as we are here in a think tank. I'm thinking about what could be a problem or a threat in Asia for innovation, respect to US, for instance. I mean, where you have a very strong innovative ground. I would say the first one which I see, which is a question mark, I'm not offering any answer. I see a tendency to develop huge companies. On whatever, Schneider is not a small company. We have 150,000 people, but I still think that the bigger we get, the more difficult it is to innovate. I mean, traditionally, small companies, small entrepreneurs tend to generate more disruptive ideas. And there is a big question in many countries between the Keiretsu in Japan, between the Chaebol in Korea, between the state-owned companies in China, to know what is the space of private and like John was saying, I'm convinced that my second point is about diversity. I'm convinced that innovation is born from our differences. You have never better chance to innovate like when you put a Chinese guy, an Indian guy, an American guy, a European guy born in different environments and mixing together. And Asia will be welcoming as many other people coming from overseas as America, for instance. One of my frustrations in Europe is our tendency to close on ourselves and not to let those brains, that diversity come, develop, prosper in our places. We spoke about education. I believe education will go under a big revolution, especially thanks to the internet, and probably the next forefront of education will be making it tailored to each kid. The good news is that we are all different. Like most of our educative systems are tailored to make us go into a mold. So how can we make, thanks to technologies, this education nurture our diversity, our differences? This is probably a front. I understand that Asia is nurturing a very high level education, very competitive. Is it creative enough? Is it turned enough to liberal arts, to that innovation? This is one of the question marks I would ask to ourselves. But overall, of course, very positive about innovation in Asia. And if I'm wrong, I'm not investing in the right place, so tell me.
Well, I think you're certainly not wrong. That I can also, I'll put my money on that. But, you raised the issue in terms of the innovation being created from the challenges in the environment. And cities is one example of that. But can I ask you to perhaps, in your own views, what do you think are the areas in which Asia can lead the world in innovation? Which are the areas where challenges are so acute or the capabilities are so strong that the combination of the capability and the challenge really creates a global leadership position?
Can you discard only one sector? I don't think so.
Or few.
I think all the sectors, the beauty of many countries in Asia is that they are developing now. So it's a blessing of the late incomer. So Asia can go directly from no phone in places to mobile phones. It can go directly to a fully big data, mobility, social internet, which it is doing, actually. There is no need to ask that. I really believe that the place where Asia has to lead is urbanization. When you look at the big stake of sustainability for the world of today, cities are already 50% of the world population, 80% of the carbon emission. The stake of climate change, energy sustainability, the stake of how we live together in a world which is not 7 billion people, but 9 billion people together, will be won or lost in the cities. And most of the large cities will be in Asia. And the big change that I see here is designing cities which are not using the paradigm of the past, good old times of a few billion people, but really inventing something which enables us to be far more efficient, get more while using less, and while spending less or wasting less. This is where I see a big, and this concept then can be exported everywhere. When Africa will, which it is doing today, will be developing its new cities, those sober cities, energy efficient, pollution efficient cities should be the blueprint for developing into those high population.
So you also are very aligned with Ide-san's views of the urban OS being one of the areas where Asia can innovate.
Yep.
Now, I'm going to open up the question to the floor very soon, but I just want to explore one more issue with the panel. And to explore that, I wanted to pose a question to the audience out here. So, when you talk about innovation and in different countries, or even inside the US, or different parts of the US, a question always arises that how can we create the next Silicon Valley? Silicon Valley is often seen as the stereotype, the ultimate example, ideal example of innovation ecosystem. So my question to you in general is, how many of you believe that Asia already has its own Silicon Valley? Whatever you think your concept of an Asian Silicon Valley is, just raise your hand if you think Asia already has its own Silicon Valley. Maybe multiple, but at least one Silicon Valley. Just raise your hand if you think it already has it. Okay. How many of you think Asia will succeed in creating its own, at least one Silicon Valley somewhere in Asia, China, India, Japan, Korea, somewhere, in the next 10 years?
Oh, yeah.
Okay, so much more positive response. So all of you, all four of you, when you were asked the question, in the panel, can Asia lead? All of you said yes. So none of you actually said maybe, no. So all of you were very strong. So can you maybe perhaps look at the response of the audience out here and ask the question, do you agree with that perhaps Asia does not have its own Silicon Valley as yet, or maybe you think it has, or what can be done to really ensure that it really will create one. And I say this, because as I told you, I was last month in Silicon Valley, and I am a graduate of Berkeley. And what I was stunned by is if you just go a few dozen miles and you cross a bridge, Berkeley has more or less missed this entire wave of, Silicon Valley. Berkeley is stuck, in the 80s and 90s. You go there, it really hasn't changed much. So even in a very concentrated area, just a few dozen miles makes a big difference. So the question to you is, what do you think about this? Does it have a Silicon Valley today? If not, how can we create one?
Well, I don't think it has one today, and I think it can be created over the next 10 years for sure. It's an ecosystem, right?
Where will it appear?
I think it could appear here, it could appear in China, it could appear in Japan, or look at what Korea is doing with respect to advanced communication technology. They're, while we're moving to 4G, they're working on 5G and 6G. And I don't know that there's a limit. Singapore, it's an ecosystem. It starts with educational institutions. If you're not graduating the right kind of people, I think it's really hard to do. Do you have the ability, are you fostering startups? Are you giving these people an avenue to display their creativity in that area? Because if they start their companies up someplace else, they're not going to help sustain the ecosystem. I think there's a few basic things that you see when you look at what makes Silicon Valley what it is. And then you've got to have companies that want to support the research effort there, because I think that most of the educational institutions in the Silicon Valley area work closely with a number of companies, dozens and hundreds, to kind of support and sustain that creative effort.
It is very difficult to make exact kind of parallel, ecosystem of the, startups in Silicon Valley. But in Japan, I am now trying. I have one project going on that, in case of Japan, we have a venture capital. Most of them are subsidiary of the bank, just take money back. But anyway, we have venture capital, but the size of the venture capital in Japan is 1/10 of that of America. But I think concerning angel investment, in America there's a lot of angel investor. But I really believe that big corporations like Japan, like Sony, Nissan, Toyota, Honda, there are a lot of technology, sleeping in research and development. So my idea is asking big corporation to make a kind of small investment as a kind of venture capital fund, and then, just carve out and research and development, technology from them, and make it a kind of a new startup company. So already 9 companies agreed with it. So I think the opportunity in Japan is to create a combination of the big corporation technology and money and resources and venture spirit of the young generation of Japan. I really believe that I don't think we can do only in Japan, but I think we want to use the system of Silicon Valley. Bringing Japanese venture capital to make a kind of exit in the United States. So I don't think country-wise, creation is of course important, but maybe we can use the power of America for startup of Japanese technology in America. So.
Well, I have just a question. Do we have to copy Silicon Valley? Because as John mentioned, I think innovation is global. I think why don't we make use of the strength of Silicon Valley? For example, it's a strength that comes from engineering. But why don't we make use of MIT, for example? That has a scientific strength. So Asia maybe can learn from, global innovations, but we can change we can create a new, not Silicon Valley, own identity. And Japan has strength from history, and Singapore, here Hong Kong. Maybe we can create a unique model to make use of the innovations in the world. And because this is the later model than the Silicon Valley. So later is sometimes, ahead of the innovation. So make use of the all resources in the world, just like John mentioned. Well, we can make use of it because we have lots of things: education, keen to education, and financial resources, and we can bring in a lot of people from abroad. So, well, it's a good model, but we have to seek something new. I mean, so I think Asia can, make it happen, I believe.
Yeah, well, it comes back. I think one of the conditions which is exceptional in Silicon Valley is this openness, and the capacity for anybody from the world to come there, compete with the best or the most disruptive, coming from anywhere else in the world, and operate on a pretty fair level of competition. There is no advantage, there is no, on the capacity, this equity of chances, this capacity to connect with the rest of the world is something which is difficult to beat today anywhere else in the world, and very stimulating, very exciting. If you are a bright, talented kid in the world today, where do you want to express your talent and your competitiveness? It's probably in Silicon Valley, because this is a place where you have the most chances. Second point also, which is a frustration which might be shared between some parts of Asia and Europe. Too often, governments, environments spend too much time protecting the industry and the companies on the past, and not leaving enough space to the destruction which has to take place. And this is the Silicon Valley is hopeful, it's very Darwinian. There is you can be born, you can raise to the top and be dead in no time, and we see that happening every day. But this is a massive condition for innovation. So the condition, I see those two: openness on capacity to start, stop, destroy, as major conditions of innovation, which are difficult today to implement in other places.
So once again, I think you get a very optimistic and I think in a very positive view in terms of the future and the possibility of having a Silicon Valley, maybe a unique next model, Silicon Valley 2.0, develop in Asia. So maybe at this point, I'd like to open the floor for your questions, comments, other observations. My only one request is please identify yourself, and please, if possible, try and keep it as short as possible, because we want to get as many questions as possible. We have about 15, 20 minutes left. So we have a hand over there. We'll take a few questions and we'll group them together. So please, sir, can we get a microphone over to, yeah, stand up. It's much better for me to have a look also. And this side, we have a couple of this. I'll come to you, yeah.
Good morning. My name's Alan Rosling. My question is to Ninami-san. Can I go back to what you said about the strength of education also being an issue for innovation, but I suggest also adding that to the strength of Asian culture also being an issue for innovation. So education and culture being strengths, but also weaknesses holding back. How do you convert the strength of culture and education to allow people to do what the Americans do without those strengths, of dare to challenge?
Okay. Let's collect a couple of questions on this side, and I'll come that side in a second. Anyone else in the middle? I saw another hand somewhere. Yes, please. So can we get the microphone to the table in front? You may have to raise your hand a little bit higher. You know, my visibility is not very high good from here where I sit.
I'm Linda Chao Yang, and my late husband was a founding member of the Department of Mechanical Engineering at the University of California, Davis. So I had opportunities to interact with his colleagues. Now, what I want to say probably happened more than 25 years ago. I hope it has changed, but I'd like to have it verified. Two examples. One, we had a very outstanding scientist from Japan, a Nobel laureate in EE. And when he was asked why he later on joined IBM and rather work for Fujitsu or some other major Japanese companies. He said he felt he had more freedom to experiment, and if he fails, no one will laugh at him. And if he succeeds, that's just okay. But don't let everybody else know about it, because the company or whatever want to keep it as their own property. Then there's another example of a very good mechanical engineering professor who left a very prestigious university in Tokyo and came to join my husband's faculty. And when my husband asked him why you gave up such prestigious position in Japan and come to University of California, Davis, he said he found it very difficult to collaborate with his colleagues because everybody want to work on his own, no ladies. And the secondary consideration, because he has 2 daughters, he thinks the daughters would have better opportunity growing up in the United States than in Japan. Now, of course, these stories were more than 25 years ago. I hope, as the other speaker said, culture. To what extent the culture has changed that would really stimulate more creative activities and innovate. Thank you.
Thank you. We'll take 2 questions from there. I think I saw, yes, please, in the back, and then I'll come to you in the front, yes.
Judy Choi from the Polytechnic University of Hong Kong. I'd like to pose a question. I believe that Asia can lead. However, I'm more concerned about its sustainability. I'd like to pose to the panelists whether it's not just education from the universities, but in order to instill and inculcate a sense of creative destruction, openness, and acceptance of failures, Ambassador Yang has referred to, is it an obstacle for Asian countries, such as Korea, Hong Kong, China, Japan? Because we were taught when we were young that we cannot fail. And as a result, this is quite different from the mindset of children when they grew up, and they still grow up in the school systems in the US with that kind of openness. They can go around and play, but the tiger moms are pretty rampant nowadays. So is it the obstacle to our future innovation and creativity? It really depends on our young people, all the way from primary school, and by the time they reach university, it's perhaps a little bit too late. So is that our obstacle? Is that the fundamental basis of innovation in Asia? Do we need a constructive revolution of our education system so that we learn from US, from the West, the developed nations, and combine and make it a global community of innovation? Thank you.
Thank you. One question from here, and then we'll get the panel to respond.
Michael Enright, University of Hong Kong. More a comment than a question. And I would encourage Fund Global Institute to, if they're not recording this, to bottle this discussion to spread it around Asia. I'm involved in a lot of discussions with governments and with business leaders on innovation around Asia in the countries in the region. And no matter what the words are, the tendency is for them to mean national innovation only, not global innovation. They tend to mean new products only, not services, processes, or social innovation. They tend to mean or want high-tech only, not innovation across all industries. They tend to think in terms of innovation in terms of products for export to advanced markets rather than for fixing problems at the top and the bottom of the pyramids in their own countries. And they do tend to think about, you know, duplicating Silicon Valleys rather than creating their own unique innovative environments. That last point actually is not unique to Asia. Last time I checked, 49 US states had plans on the books to become the next biotech center of the world. More than 100 US cities have plans to do the same, and the Asian countries and cities are doing the same thing. They're tending to target the same things, same technologies, rather than doing, quite frankly, what the members of the panel have been suggesting.
Okay, so I think we got 4 great questions, some with some overlapping themes. So I'd like to request the panel members to choose whichever subset, 1, 2, or whatever, however you want to respond to them in any order. So, Hideo-san, do you want to go first? Anything you want to respond to?
I think all the question is pointed out right points, but as I told you from the beginning that in Asia, there's a kind of the needs for the change. So not only, I mean, Asia, and also the same thing in America. But if you see the weakness of America, for example, talking about the infrastructure, so between Tokyo and Osaka, every 7 minutes we have a kind of train going. But if you live in New York and going to Boston, how many trains? So I think, I mean, if you live in Los Angeles, 80 years old, can you drive a car? No, I mean, so that, I mean, in Asia, I think in America is different. So I'm not talking about the spirit of innovation in America is great. But, you know, the America create after IT, a lot of corporations like Facebook, like, I mean, you can name any company you can remember, Google. I mean, the huge value created, I mean, after IT innovation, not being after 1995. So IT technology changed totally American structure. Then an application of the information technology, this is the kind of financial industry. So in America, power of America is IT and application as, I mean, financial business. But in Asia, it's different, still in a growing stage. So I think, I mean, not envying just America as a kind of innovation center, but I think we can create innovation center in Asia for a better city and better society, but it may take time. But America's infrastructure is really weak. So I think you better to make a kind of balance between, if you go too much for IT, so I mean, so I am not answering it, but this is my reaction. I mean, for Asia. Asia is full of opportunity, but whether we can cooperate and how we can be open and how we can be collaborate transborder is important. If you stick only to China, Japan, Singapore, and then I think we will fail. I think opportunity should be open to, I mean, cross-border collaboration is essential.
Okay. Who else wants to pick up?
I'd like to talk about the education question, because I think that, you know, in a world where companies like ours have tens of thousands of engineers, and they're located, we have 6,000 in India, 4,000 in China, several thousand spread throughout Asia, we just don't see cultural differences being an impediment to our ability to innovate. And the school systems they come from, frankly, it matters less. And I with all due respect to my U.S. education, I think there are flaws in the U.S. model. I don't think there's enough emphasis put on math and science. I think there are issues there too. And as a company, we try to hire great athletes because we can't necessarily predict what they're going to look like 10 or 15 years after they join us. But if they come with the basics, they will work and thrive, hopefully, in a global system. And I think increasingly that's what you're seeing, not just in big global companies, but in smaller regional companies that know that they have to operate in a bunch of different markets. So I would be focused less on retooling the educational system and more on creating good athletes that when they leave school know how to learn, can adapt to different systems, and end up being productive contributors in different ways throughout their life.
I also share
Microphone for...
Microphone? Yeah. I also share the view that education should go through a massive revolution. let's face it, in most of the countries, education has been tailored to format a lot of people to the same format. Very academic. Okay, it's good to be very strong in math, in science, accumulate knowledge. But in the world of today, which is networked, which is social network, which is totally global, you need to develop the capability to pick the ideas, connect the dots, be very fast in connecting across cultures, across boundaries. I think the internet is changing fundamentally the way we can educate kids. I see my kids going on the Khan Academy for commodities, learning math and those kind of things, and having more time on their own to develop their challenging spirit, which, by the way, is going back to me, which is not good news. But it's a thing that we have certainly to work on. What strikes me is that when we get educated, we are not educated to what we're going to work on. When I went through my engineering school, IT was starting, the PC was starting. So what is the point of an education? You know that 80% of what the world you will live in will be doesn't exist at the time you are educated. So I totally concur with the fact that education should be more training people to adaptability, flexibility, learning, rather than anything else. And in many cases, education is very unionized, too much formatted, and not enough opening to those kind of skills.
Before you respond, Inami-san, can I ask you to specifically also respond to the question posed out here in terms of the culture in companies, like especially in Japan, or maybe in Asia in general, in terms of the dare to challenge and the freedom to experiment, the kind of issue that's raised?
Yeah, well, well, I can't simplify culture overall of Asia, but I can talk about maybe Japan. I have to respect Ide-san a lot. Seniority system, still that is going on, but that is a stumbling block sometimes. But I like Adyo-san, but the key thing is the freedom of speech is very important. And sometimes I have reservation to talk about frank opinions to the senior people. That is a stumbling block for innovation sometimes. But we've got good education. So that question was terrific. I think, but most people in Asia got education from United States or EU, EC. I think they have a strong idea to other the innovative ideas to change status quo for the better. And but Asia has the own identity, like thinking more of a family, for example. I think that happens in the western part of the world. But I think how to put them together. But I think definitely going to your question, I think freedom of speech, freedom to do things is a value, and we have to put more work on Asian countries so that we can secure freedom of speech, freedom of to do things. Well, I see lots of Nobel laureates in Japan. They went to States to enjoy the freedom of work. That's something we have to learn, definitely. We have lots of Nobel laureates in Japan, but everybody went to States. And then after coming back or during their stay in States, they got the Nobel Prizes. So in Asia, we have to deeply concern that to what extent we have to go toward the freedom of speech and the freedom of working. So we have to learn from maybe United States and the rest of the world. But I think we are in the process of going toward the freedom of speech, but we have to learn. We have to do more things toward that. And I think culture matters. And we have to maybe get rid of some bad practice in the society. And we have to bring new things. But I guess in Asia, again, we have lots of social changes. And we have lots of social issues. That creates solid base for innovation. So that's a unique part of this area. Because, again, we see a lot of pollution. We see a lot of massive, traffic. we can't get rid of those. That's a social issue, and that's quite unique in the world. So definitely we have to challenge those social issues. That creates a new model in Asia, I believe, but definitely freedom of working, freedom of speech, those things are very much a prerequisite to advance innovative environment in Asia.
Okay. So we covered a number of very, I think, relevant themes, and innovation is a very broad theme, it's a very important theme, and clearly we only touched upon a few important areas. But before we close the session, I would like to maybe request the panel members to make one closing short concern or risk that we in the audience collectively should be focused on, just to ensure that this positive momentum in Asia on innovation doesn't get derailed. Because in general, there's a very strong positive vibe, a positive momentum around innovation in Asia. So what can go wrong? What is the risk that we should be aware of, that we should try to correct? Maybe a short statement from each one of you in closing. Maybe I'll go, if you allow me, perhaps from you first, Pascal.
I would repeat myself.
I think the microphone, yeah, thank you.
Right here. Would repeat myself and say diversity, openness, making sure that there is a lot of circulation between the markets of Asia and the rest of the world.
Make sure you're connected with the rest of the world and build on your strengths.
More opportunities of education to the people. That's the role of the government. The role of government is very important to provide fair opportunity of education to, I would say, all people.
Well, my last word is don't look back and go forward. And instead of innovation, my new word is a meta innovation. Not only small innovation, but a society innovation that I describe meta innovation. Okay. Especially needed for Japan to open the country, receive diversity.
Yeah. So, in conclusion, I will not try to summarize the discussion, but I'll just try to maybe emphasize one point which clearly has been very apparent. The theme is on innovation, and clearly people talk about technology and other kinds of processes and products of innovation, but a constant theme that has come up in the questions and in many of the comments has been around people and culture. And these people and culture issues are extremely important. And on one hand, we have to value the differences that exist and be able to leverage them effectively. At the same time, we have to ask ourselves some important questions in terms of, are we providing the right leadership in both business and government to create the right environment? I think the issue of environment is something that has come up repeatedly. And I mention this because, having lived in the US for many years, I see how Asians, you move Chinese, you move Indians, you move Japanese to Asia, and they thrive. They thrive because they have the discipline of hard work and all the basic foundations. And then they have the environment which allows them to, in fact, be creative. So the key question that we have in front of us really is, how can we benefit from that? At the same time, how can we encourage many millions more who have the same potential inside them in Asia, who don't necessarily live and work in the West? So thank you very much for your kind attention, your participation, and please join me in thanking the panel for the wonderful comments.